Welcome and good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Carmen, the Director of Religious Education here at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church in Houston, Texas. Our beloved community of faith, reason, and affection welcomes all to grow in mind and spirit as together we build a better world. If you are joining us for the first time this morning, we extend a special welcome and invite you to fill out our visitor card so you can receive more information about Emerson and our activities. Again, welcome to all. Today, the Reverend Carmen Emerson leads worship with support from me and our music director, Adrian Rodriguez, with Emersonian Dory Wolf on the tech deck. The Reverend Carmen Emerson is staff chaplain for Baptist Nassau, a community hospital on Amelia Island, Florida. Reverend Emerson served the Baptist hospital system in Jacksonville, Florida for 2 years as a palliative care chaplain resident before moving to Baptist Nassau. She was ordained a UU minister in 2010 and served UU congregations in New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee before answering a deeper call to chaplaincy. She lives in Yulee, Florida with her husband of 35 years, Jim, their 9-year-old Bassador, Grace, and their 11-year-old tuxedo cat, Lulu. As I mentioned a minute ago, you'll notice we've muted you. This helps all of us to hear the service better, and we encourage you to use the chat box. Following our worship service, we'll have coffee hour time, a chance for you to gather in smaller groups to discuss the service and what's going on in your lives. Adrian?
Whoever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you find yourself on life's journey, whichever your pronouns, whether you've walked in or rolled in or dialed in, whomever you love, you are welcome here. Every Sunday, Unitarian Universalists across the country and around the world light a chalice as a symbol of our faith. If you have a chalice at home, we encourage you to grab it and light it, or perhaps a candle as we read our chalice lighting. We light this chalice in honor of life's sacred dance of living and dying. May its flame remind us of those who have passed to us fragments of holiness. May it remind us that we too are participants in the dance. And now, if you would join us in singing our opening hymn, Let It Be a Dance.
Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again.
Our story today is a true classic, Badger's Parting Gifts by Susan Varley. Badger was dependable, reliable, and always ready to lend a helping paw. He was also very old and he knew almost everything. Badger was so old that he knew he must soon die. Badger wasn't afraid of death. Dying meant only that he would leave his body behind, and as his body didn't work as well as it had in days gone by, Badger wasn't too concerned about that. His only worry was how his friends would feel when he was gone. Hoping to prepare them, Badger had told them that someday soon he would be going down the long tunnel, and he hoped they wouldn't be too sad when it happened. One day, as Badger was watching Mole and Frog race down the hillside, he felt especially old and tired. He wished more than anything that he could run with them, but he knew his old legs wouldn't let him. He watched Mole and Frog for a long time, happy to see his friends enjoying themselves. It was late when he arrived home. He wished the moon good night and closed the curtains on the cold world outside. He made his way slowly down to the warm fire that was waiting for him deep underground. He had supper and then sat down at his desk to write a letter. When he was finished with that, he settled down in his rocking chair near the fire. He gently rocked himself to and fro and soon was fast asleep, having a strange yet wonderful dream like none he'd ever had before. Much to Badger's surprise, he was running. Ahead of him was a long tunnel. His legs felt strong and sure as he ran toward it. He no longer needed his walking stick, so he left it lying on the floor of the tunnel. Badger moved swiftly, running faster and faster through the long passageway until his paws no longer touched the earth. He felt himself turning head over paws, falling and tumbling, but nothing hurt. He felt free. It was as if he had fallen out of his body. The following day, Badger's friends gathered anxiously outside Badger's door. They were worried because he hadn't come out to say good morning as he always did. Fox broke the sad news that Badger was dead and read Badger's note to them. It said simply, "Gone down the long tunnel. Bye-bye, Badger." All the animals had loved Badger and everyone was sad. Mole especially felt lost, alone and desperately unhappy. In bed that night, Mole could think only of Badger. Tears rolled down his velvety nose, soaking the blankets he clung to for comfort. Outside, it began to snow. Winter had begun, and soon a thick layer of snow hid the animals' homes, where they would stay snug and warm during the cold months. The snow covered the valley, but it didn't conceal the sadness that Badger's friends felt. Badger had always been there when anyone needed him. The animals all wondered what they would do now that he was gone. Badger had told them not to be unhappy, but it was hard not to be. As spring drew near, the animals often visited each other and talked about the day when Badger was alive. Mole was good at using scissors, and he told about the time Badger had taught him how to cut out a chain of moles from a piece of folded paper. Paper moles had littered the ground that day. Mole remembered the joy he'd felt when he had finally succeeded in making a complete chain of moles with all the paws joined. Frog was an excellent skater. He recalled how Badger had helped him take his first slippery steps on the ice. Badger had gently guided him across the ice until he had gained enough confidence to glide out on his own. Fox remembered how, when he was a young kit, he could never knot his tie properly until the always dapper Badger showed him how. Fox could now tie every knot ever invented, and some he'd made up himself. Of course, his own necktie was always perfectly knotted. Badger had given Mrs. Rabbit his special recipe for gingerbread and had shown her how to bake gingerbread rabbits. Mrs. Rabbit was well known throughout the valley for her excellent cooking. As she talked about her first lessons with Badger, So long ago, she could almost smell the fragrance of gingerbread fresh from the oven. Each of the animals had a special memory of Badger, something he had taught them that they could now do extremely well. He had given them each a parting gift to treasure always. Using these gifts, they would be able to help each other. As the last of the snow melted, so did the animals' sadness. Whenever Badger's name was mentioned, someone remembered another story that made them all smile. One warm spring day, as Mole was walking on the hillside where he'd last seen Badger, he wanted to thank his friends for his parting gift. "Thank you, Badger," he said softly, believing that Badger would hear him. And somehow, Badger did.
Giving out of what is our own is a transformative act. As a community of faith, we collect an offering not for ourselves or our congregation, but to give to others as a collective action of our community and as a way to share out our lived values. Please give with a generous heart to support the August Share the Plate recipients Rebuilding Together Houston. For nearly 40 years, Rebuilding Together Houston has been the only organization in our region to provide hundreds of families with annually with non-disaster repairs. Their work adds 10 to 20 years of life to a home, making the home safe, livable, and more resilient against disaster. They enlist community volunteers and licensed contractors to repair the homes of low-income elderly, U.S. military veterans, homeowners with disabilities, and working families in need. Learn more at rebuildingtogetherhouston.org. And as always, 25% of your offering will go to Interfaith Ministries Meals on Wheels, feeding Houston seniors. We have 3 ways to give. You can text the number on the screen, go to our webpage for online giving, or if you prefer to mail a check, you can mail it to 1900 Bering Drive. The link to the online portal will be in the chat. Thank you for sharing as you were able.
as we enter a time of meditation. Please find a comfortable place to be or settle into your seat. Place your feet flat on the floor if you can, so that you might feel grounded, more connected to the earth, which nourishes and sustains us all. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and take a deep breath in.
This morning's meditation is Everything Falls Away by Parker Palmer, and he begins by quoting a line from a William Stafford poem. There's a thread you follow, writes Stafford. It goes among things that change, but it does not change. Sooner or later, everything falls away. You, the work you've done, your successes, large and small, your failures too. Those moments when you were light alongside the times you became one with the night. The friends, the people you loved who loved you, those who might have wished you ill, none of this is forever. All of it is soon to go, or going, or long gone. Everything falls away except the thread you followed, unknowing all along. This thread that strings together all you've been and done, the thread you didn't know you were tracking until, toward the end, you see that the thread is what stays as everything else falls away. Follow that thread as far as you can, and you'll find that it does not end, but weaves the unimaginable vastness of your life. Your life was never the solo turn it seemed to be. It was always part of the great weave of nature and humanity, an immensity we come to know only as we follow our own small threads to the place where they merge with the boundless whole. Each of our threads runs its course, then joins in life together. This magnificent tapestry, this masterpiece in which we live forever. I'm so pleased to be with you this morning, and I want to thank your worship team, especially Katie and Adrian, for their leadership and their flexibility in preparing for this service. As they noted, I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister currently serving as the solo chaplain in a small community hospital in Northeast Florida, just 12 miles from the Florida-Georgia line. Our hospital is in a conservative community religiously and politically, and only about 47% of the county's population of 37,000 have been vaccinated against the COVID virus. And of course, our Florida governor has been, let me say it this way, less than insightful about managing the virus in our state. You in Texas, perhaps you understand this. Our hospital has been busy, as have many. In our 62-bed hospital, our COVID patient census has been running over 30 for the past several weeks, with predictions for serious increase. Things are going to get worse before they get better, and we are doing everything we can to prepare ourselves for that. Our staff, especially nurses and respiratory therapists, are physically and emotionally exhausted, but they know how to work through exhaustion. What scares me are the moments that they feel disheartened, for we surely need courage and compassion to see us through this. As one of our CNAs said to me recently, there is just no joy in healthcare. Can you imagine being boots on the ground in these circumstances and finding no joy in your work? Yes, things are grim, and yet grace abides. Day after day, I witness all of our teams offering excellent, compassionate, dedicated care to one another and to all of those entrusted to us, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated alike. I see our hospital president dressed in scrubs, snapping on blue gloves, using Steric-cloths to clean surfaces and phones in the ICU. I see our chief financial officer in full PPE delivering food trays to COVID rooms every day at lunchtime. I see the environmental services staff doing what they always do, all the little things that make the big things possible, invisible yet steady in their care of our house. So yes, grace abides. I know that grace is an interesting word to use in a Unitarian Universalist sermon. In secular terms, grace is thought of as benevolent goodwill between and among us. In Christian theology, grace is considered the unmerited gift of divine favor in the salvation of sinners. In Unitarian Universalist theology, grace is empathy, writes Natalie Briscoe, who's the co-lead of the Southern Region UUA. And I think that Natalie gets to the heart of the matter for us, for me as a Unitarian Universalist. Grace is empathy, that embodied, soulful, heartfelt knowledge and understanding that we have for one another, human being to human being, living creature to living creature, especially during times of suffering. For me, extending such grace to another person is the spiritual practice that helps me best live the ethics of our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. In this time of politics and pandemic, it feels even more important to engage in this spiritual practice of extending grace to others because it reflects both personal freedom and personal responsibility. I can choose to do this as I search for truth and meaning in this time of fracture and fear and overwhelming death. Anna Sale, the host of the podcast Death, Sex, and Money and author of Let's Talk About Hard Things, says that we are often tentative in our conversations around death, and so they end shy of real connection. Skipping the conversation about death because the words aren't coming easily is shirking away from death's ultimate challenge to use our time well and with intention. Now, in these times, when we are reminded of the swiftness of our human lives and the unpredictabilities of our deaths, I believe that actually considering our own deaths and connecting with, talking with those we love about our death is part of using our time well and with intention. This morning, I encourage you to risk a bold rather than tentative conversation about your death with those you love and those who love you. And I encourage you to talk about three things. First, say the things you need to say. And there are usually four things that need to be said. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. Second, get very specific about the things you want when you begin to face decline and end of life, and share what you want with those who will be caring for you. And third, consider the legacy of your life, that thread we heard about in this morning's poem meditation? What is it that you think that is? If it's not what you want to be and there's a gap between those things, what do you need to do or say to narrow that gap? Let's go deeper. So the first thing I'm asking you to do is to say the things that need to be said to the people you love most. Palliative care physician Dr. Ira Byock famously writes about the 4 things that matter most, and that these 11 simple words can change both our living and our dying. Again, those words are: please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. These sound like such simple phrases, but trust me, when everything is pulled back to the essentials and every breath is precious, these simple phrases become profound messages of truth and meaning and empathic grace. Now, we could do a year of sermons about forgiveness. It can be some of the hardest emotional, heavy lifting we're ever called to do. But the important thing about forgiveness is that it helps you not stay stuck in the past. It lets you move forward into life and also into death. Please forgive me, and I forgive you are acknowledgments of our shared humanity, statements of fact that our imperfection may at times have caused us to harm or hurt another person, or to have been harmed or hurt by another person, hopefully never by design, and yet still painful, even if carelessly or by accident. The please part of please forgive me acknowledges that forgiveness is not a given in any relationship. There's humility and contrition in the please. Forgiveness is the antidote to regret, which can gnaw like an insatiable rat at our hearts and minds and spirits. So please forgive me, and I forgive you are the short statements that turn the rats of regret away, small statements representing big thoughts and big feelings. I'm sorry that I hurt or disappointed or neglected or betrayed you. I seek your forgiveness for my sake and for yours. I forgive you for the same reasons. Thank you is our statement of gratitude for things large and small that help us build memories and meaning in our wild and precious lives. Your gratitude is unique to you as your life is unique to you. And saying thank you for the things that touched you, moved you, taught you, brought you comfort and joy, that's your acknowledgement of those precious moments that have happened since you drew your first breath and will be meaningful to you until you draw your last breath. Hopefully, each one of us knows what it means to hear or to say, to feel the sentiment behind the words, I love you. Again, so much is encompassed by these words. I see you, I cherish you. I am the me I am because I am in relationship with you. I love you is easy for some of us to say. It's harder for others among us. If it is easy, I encourage you to say it as often as you can. If it is hard, I encourage you to say it as often as you can. Saying these 4 things that matter most is the first thing I want you to consider as part of the freedom, responsibility, truth, meaning, and empathic grace you will practice in a well-lived, intentional life before death. Yes, Byock offers them as words to share at end of life, but I encourage you to find ways to say them often and in the meantime. So remember, there are 3 things I'm asking you to consider this morning. The first is saying what you need to say to the people you love, and we've just spent some time with that. The second thing I want to ask you to consider is telling the people you love what you want very specifically when you begin to face decline and end of life. By this, I mean taking the time to create a legal document that sets forth your wishes and desires for treatment when you are no longer able to speak for yourself. Different states use different tools. Living wills and healthcare surrogates may be familiar terms to you. There's also the Honoring Choices program, the 5 Wishes program. Find the thing that works for you and take that bold conversation with people you love. I ask you also, as part of that process, to consider code status as part of the wishes you have for your embodied self at end of life. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not giving you legal advice. Please, again, consult your own attorney, your state statutes about the requirements for your state. I am offering you a chaplain's advice about this gift of empathic grace to your family members during a time of crisis and suffering. Tell them what you want before you need it and before they need to make a decision for you during a healthcare crisis. Get specific about your code status and ask that it be placed in your orders. So here's a quick breakdown in our hospital. And again, it may be different for you in Texas, but I just want to give you a place to begin this part of the conversation. So full code means that you want every effort made to save and preserve your life. DNR, do not resuscitate, means that you do not want to receive any life-saving treatment should you suffer a cardiopulmonary event that would otherwise end your life. Limited code means that you want pharmaceutical help to keep you alive, but you draw the line at electrical shocks and chest compressions that can be so traumatic to an already injured, suffering body. And then allow natural death. A and D means that you want to be kept comfortable, as anxiety and pain-free as possible, as your life naturally draws to an end. Having witnessed so much heartbreaking decision-making during health crises over the last year and a half, I urge you with all that I am to get very specific with your family about what you want. Again, being courageous with this conversation is a reflection of the freedom, responsibility, truth, meaning, and empathic grace that help us live well and intentionally. When you've discerned your wishes and choices, please share them not only with your family, but also with your physician and with your minister so that all may be advocates for you when the time comes. As we began this morning, I shared that there were 3 things I would ask you to consider as part of a well-lived life before death. First was saying what you need to say to the people you love. Second was telling the people you love what you want for your embodied self, very specifically what you want for your embodied self when the time comes. I want to close now with the third thing to consider, and that is the legacy of your life. What is it? What would you like for it to be? If you examine that thread, is it what you want it to be? And if not, what is it still possible for you to do and say to make those 2 things closer together? As an encouragement of why this matters, I want to offer a story from a moment of chaplaincy during the time of COVID. I'm sorry, the background noise. My dog Grace just made her entry into the sanctuary. So here's the story. I was speaking to the adult child of an elderly patient who was admitted to our hospital through our emergency department. During admission, he had been sitting up in bed, laughing about pop culture with his daughter and the medical team. Later that same day, he was moved to a regular inpatient room, and he was in there complaining about calling his daughter, talking voice to ear, telling her, "Oh my goodness, I asked for a cold Coca-Cola 3 hours ago and I still don't have it. And yes, we are actually that busy in the hospital." But he started the day laughing in ED, moved to an inpatient room complaining, still communicating with his daughter over the phone. Within 48 hours of sitting up, laughing, complaining, and connecting voice to ear with his daughter by telephone, the patient was moved to the ICU and intubated. As you may know, when people are intubated on a ventilator, they are given medication to paralyze them so that they do not harm themselves with movement or by trying to remove the vent, which is very uncomfortable. This also means they're no longer able to speak. This was a despairing situation for his daughter, who was his healthcare surrogate, had to make a decision about his plan of care. She asked for time with me, time with the chaplain, to help in her discernment. In situations like this, it's important for me to know about the patient's and the family's religious and spiritual lives. Sometimes those are not the same thing. It is important to review the family's understanding of the medical information they've received, which can be overwhelming. And then with an understanding of the spiritual grounding of patient and family, and a review of the medical facts, as the family understand them to be, I then ask them about their person's life legacy. Sometimes I'll ask the question directly, what do you think your father considers their legacy to be? And speaking about that helps them in their discernment about the plan of care for their person, or to be comfortable with the plan of care if their person was wise and already had one in place, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Sometimes, as I did with this daughter, I asked them to read what I call the sacred text of relationship, the sacred text of relationship with their person. If you consider the way your father lived his life and the way he lived his life in relationship with you and others, what does that story, what does that sacred narrative tell you about the choices he would make now if he could, and the choices he would want you to make on his behalf at this time? In this case, his daughter sighed with relief as she faced those hard decisions because her father had been clear throughout his lifetime about his choices, about the man he was, the values he held, and what he would choose now about the last hours of his life before death. She knew what she had to do to honor him by reading that sacred text of relationship. I realize that this is a hard conversation for most of us to have. There are so many taboos and superstitions about it. This morning, I asked you to consider conversations and connections with your loved ones about your own death, an empathic grace that reflects well-lived and intentional life, lived freely and responsibly, and filled with truth and meaning. This is a gift of grace, an act of grace for your loved ones. Tell them the 4 things that matter most. Tell them very specifically your wishes and desires for your embodied self at end of life. And reflect together on the legacy of your life and the sacred texts of your relationships. Grace abides, and it abides in you. May it be so, and may we be so. Amen. And if you would join together now as we sing hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
May you live well and with intention, trusting in your capacity for grace and empathy, confident in your courage to do hard things freely and responsibly, mindful of the steadfast and creative loves that holds us all, peaceful in the sacred stories of your life and their telling by those who love you. Amen.